Hi there, Nigel Saunders for KW Bonsai. This morning we're going to look at my Serissa tree and we're going to style it and repot it. I've already done some styling on this tree. I'm styling it like an African Acacia tree. So those are those trees that grow in the African savanna. They have a really flat top, an elegant trunk that comes up, and they're a really recognizable style, and that's what we want to do with this tree, is get that African flat top look to it. So I've already began styling it in that form, and it's at the point now where it needs pruning, and we're also going to repot it into this shallow oval landscape style pot, and in an effort to give it that African savanna look. So you'll see this tree in the middle of this very large pot, and it should make it look more lonely, I hope. You know, a single tree growing in this big pot. So we're hoping to get a nice style to the tree and the planting. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go look at some photos of acacia trees in Africa. We're going to study the proportions, the style of the canopy, and the general features of them. So we'll do that, and then we'll come back and start working on this tree.
Okay, so here's an acacia tree. This is the style that we're trying to achieve. This one's got some dead branches at the bottom, and you know, you can see all the trunks that form the canopy, and then there's just a very thin flat layer of foliage on the top. And it has a slight dome shape to it, but very little. It's almost perfectly flat. There are a few tufts of foliage here and there that kind of break it up, which looks good. Here's one that's got more of a umbrella style canopy. The trunks are thicker. You know, it's not a perfect arc, the canopy, but it's broken up a little. This one has a sparser canopy. It has a very short trunk, a lot of branches that reach vertically or on an angle but reach towards the sky, and then the tufts of foliage are broken up. This one has sort of a medium height trunk, and it has a lot of branches and trunks that go up to the canopy. And again, a very thin, sparse layer of foliage on top. Here's the root base of an acacia tree, and you can see it's really gnarly, and you know, it's well suited for the Serissa because they have similar type roots. Here's an older acacia, has a fairly thick trunk. The branches are quite short and thick, and the canopy is a little more typical of you know, any tree. It has more foliage. Here's one that's, again, has a very short trunk. It branches into multi-trunks. They reach skyward. Has a very flat top. And yeah, it's pretty interesting looking. So that's a good example. If we analyze the proportions of the tree, if we take the diameter of the trunk as 1, the height of the trunk before we have the canopy is about 6 times the diameter of the trunk. The actual canopy on this tree is 3 times the diameter of the trunk. And so the total height is 9 times the diameter of the trunk. The width of the canopy is 20 times the diameter of the trunk. So I like this tree. It's for me, it's got a nice balance of foliage and it looks elegant. So these are kind of the approximate proportions we're looking for when we're styling our tree.
Okay, so I've made a template from the proportions of the tree that we looked at, the photograph. So we've got our trunk as 1, height of the trunk 6 times the width of the trunk, Our crown is 3 times the width of the trunk, and the total top canopy is 20 times the width of the trunk. So if we place that against our tree, you can see everything's good until about here. So our crown is high, and our width isn't quite there yet. So what we're going to try and do is bring the crown down, and we're going to try and grow the tree out wider. The acacia trees, because you have such a shallow crown, you've got to get a lot of subdividing, and it's got to get finer and finer as it gets towards the top canopy. So if we were to wire these down, you can see they grow quite straight. So to get that real miniature look, we want these branches to zigzag and have a lot of movement in them. And you just couldn't wire these straight shoots to get that kind of natural movement to them. So we're doing it with pruning. And again, it'll probably take a little longer to get our final shape of the tree, but I think in the end we'll have quite a nice tree. So we're going to go in now and have a look at some of the details of the tree. We've got, let me just get a pointer here. Our trunk comes up pretty good. It's you know, it doesn't have a lot of taper, but then these acacia trees don't. They're fairly slender trunks. We're subdividing nicely. We have sort of a main trunk line coming up here and the auxiliary branches coming off, which is, it's a pretty nice arrangement. We've got some good branches that are hanging down, that are coming out quite flat, which is nice. Here's these long shoots I'm talking about. Yeah, it would be very difficult to wire them, and if you did, you would get these lazy kind of gradual bends, and we're after sharp kind of bends in these branches, because on the acacia trees the upper canopy is quite thick and chaotic. They just fill in all these spaces with very dense growth. So as I said, we've got to get this structure finer and finer as it goes up towards the top of the canopy. So we're going to do some hard pruning here. The first thing we'll do is we're going to shorten all the new shoots down to a set of leaves now. Some of them have some leaves quite close. Others, this one's quite bare, so it'll have to be pruned off quite short again. So that's what we'll do. We'll go in with our scissors and we'll start reducing our new shoots back to the first set of leaves. Just like that. One thing with the serissas, they're very smelly. It's a foul smelling tree, so when you prune them, both the top and the roots, it doesn't smell too good. However, they do flower. I think I have one flower on the tree, unless it fell off. I guess it fell off. Sorry. They get little white flowers on them, and this style of tree, you know, having this nice flat canopy, it'll really show those flowers off when it does flower. So again, we're just pruning our shoots back. You can do some directional pruning, but serissas grow quite chaotically. You can't really guarantee the direction of a new shoot. You can to a degree, but you don't always get, you know, leaves growing in the direction you want. These ones are sideways. So basically, we do want to prune them so we're pruning back to a downward or an upward facing leaf. They come in pairs. So we want our growth to stay flat, so we don't want anything growing up. So if we can, we prune to a downward facing leaf. If there is no downward facing leaf, we'll just have to prune it back to the first set of leaves and be patient. Anything growing straight up, we basically want to get rid of. There's a nice downward facing leaf right here, so we can prune back to there. And our new growth will come more horizontal. So that's what I'm doing. So I'm going to trim up the new growth back to the first set of leaves and try and do some directional pruning, and we'll come back and see what it looks like then. Okay, so I've pruned it back to the new growth to the first set of leaves. So we'll spin it around. So you can see we've lost a bit of our canopy. However, it's part of the process. We got to fill it in again. The next stage will be to look at structural pruning. So because we want to keep this flat, we're going to remove any growth that's coming straight up. Or if we don't remove it, we're going to shorten it significantly. Serissas will sprout from old wood quite easily. So if you do hard prune it back, you know, if you were to move it right back to here, it would sprout all over the place. However, we're going to try and keep what we can of the canopy. We might have to do some fairly hard pruning in places. There's a flower bud coming out there. Yeah. So our goal is to, every branch should have light. So some of these top ones are growing a little long and they're shadowing out some of these lower branches. So we'll want to cut those back harder. It would be easy to just go in and chop the top off, and it would probably be quite successful. However, we're going to try and do it, you know, put a little more thought into it. Another thing, when viewed from above, we want to keep our oval shape. So, you know, again, if our sun's rising on this side of the tree, it goes across in the sky and sets over on this side of the tree. So this side and this side will have lower branches and be longer. This side will be more compact and the branches won't be so low because the sun's not shining in the front or the back of the tree. So we're trying to get that natural look to it. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to keep pruning it. Any vertical growth, we're going back quite hard. In an effort to get our flat top. Now, you can see some trees have an absolute flat top. Other ones had a slightly rounded crown. So I think we'll go somewhere in between. We'll try and get a fairly flat top, but not perfectly flat. And then maybe as the tree gets older, we'll try and get a few more clumps of foliage rather than one huge canopy to break it up so it doesn't look too artificial. But that'll be way down the road. So I'll finish doing that. I'll keep pruning the structure back in order to get a flatter top on it. And we'll come in and check it out when that's done. Okay, so we've pruned the top down. It's quite flat on top now, which looks better. And we've got a lot of holes in the canopy. We'll just have to work on filling those in as the tree grows new growth. They'll slowly start filling in over the years. So the next thing we're going to do is we want to clean up the trunk. There's a lot of moss on the trunk and we don't want the moss on the trunk. And then we're going to get ready for transplanting into the new pot. So for the moss, I'm just picking it off with the tweezers. Okay, so I've cleaned up the moss on the trunk. You can start to see some of the surface roots. So we're going to move into the shade now and repot this into our new pot. One note about the roots on the Serissa tree, they can grow quite wild and chaotic. So this tree, I've had this tree for probably, it was a small cutting, probably the size of this branch up here, and it's grown since then. And I've been root pruning it, you know, every year or two, and the roots are getting better, but I would say the natural style of a Serissa is to have really wild and gnarly roots, almost tangled. So in this tree, I've made an effort to not get that look. I've been trying to sort the roots out in a radial pattern and keep them flat. So when we dig it up, we'll see how they look. Every time I repot this, I go, wow, these roots have just gone wild and crazy again. But I think they'll be okay, I hope. As you can see from that close-up of the Acacia tree, you can get some really wild, gnarly bases at the trunk of the tree. So, you know, if we don't get the roots sorted out perfectly, it's probably okay, but you know, we try and keep them reasonable. So we'll have a look at it when we go to repot it. So again, before you start repotting the tree, have everything ready. So I've got my dipping tank for washing the roots down here. I've got my pot with screens in it and a fine layer of soil in the bottom of the pot. I've got a scoop of soil. I've got my tree. I've got a watering can. I've got a misting bottle. I've got a spoon, a root rake, tweezers, and pruners. So we can begin the process. The first step in repotting is to loosen the tree from the pot. So I have a sharp edge. You can use like a butter knife or anything. And you want to loosen the roots from the edge of the pot. So you want to go all the way around. I can feel some roots in there. This tree was repotted 2 years ago, and it's been growing very strongly. It's been pruned back quite a lot. It didn't look like a flat top tree at all a couple of years ago, and then I started training as a flat top tree, and of course I had to do some pretty hard pruning to get it even close to this shape. Okay, so that's loosened. Let's see if it comes out. It does. And again, it's always nice when you get a nice brick of soil and roots, because that means every part of the soil has been good and the roots are growing everywhere in it. If you get, if your soil's too dry, you'll find the top is really crumbly and all the roots grow in the bottom. If it's too wet, all the roots in the bottom rot and you get all your roots growing on the top. So this is pretty good. When you get a nice brick like that, it means you've got good soil and the roots have been growing well. So the first step is to comb the roots out. And I always start from the top. And I comb in a radial fashion like this. And you try not to tear your roots. You just sort of slowly work at it, like so. There's a lot of tangled roots in here. I can't believe they've gotten this bad since I've repotted it. So we're going to flip the tree over, start combing the roots in a radial pattern from the bottom. Whew, and it smells too. Move my drainage screen, which was quite clogged with roots. I'm probably missing this on the camera, aren't I? Maybe I'm not. I don't know. So yeah, we're going to comb it out from top to bottom, and then we'll wash it. Okay, so I've got the roots combed out best I can for now. The next step, we're going to wash them in our water here. We'll do that. Just swish it around a bit. So there we are. Because these roots are very fine, you should keep misting them because they'll dry out fairly quickly, especially when I've got it in the sun here. Yeah, so keep misting them. So you can see these roots were sorted out last time I repotted it, and all this is new growth, and it's gone really chaotic. So to get a good root system on a Serissa, pretty difficult. You have to do a lot of pruning. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to do a lot of pruning on them. I'm going to start pruning the roots. There's one growing straight up here that I want to get rid of. There we go. And we've got to untangle all these roots. They just grow in all kinds of twisty patterns, which is just part of it. So we want to keep this root system fairly shallow for our pot. So a lot of it's going to go. And we'll take good care of the tree afterwards until it grows its new root system. So I'm doing horizontal cuts. Now there's one growing down from the bottom which we don't want. We want all the radial roots feeding the trunk, none growing down from underneath. So here's another one that's growing straight down. We'll just cut it right off. So you can see in 2 years you get some pretty thick roots. They really grow some roots. So we're going to cut this one off. There we go. We're going to be left with almost nothing. There's another one growing straight down here. I really like to grow straight down. There's another one's got to get pruned off. I think in the shallower pot it'll help too because they'll be forced to grow in a horizontal plane. Where's that one coming from? Right here. That one can go. And this one has to get pruned off about here. And this one about here.
And there, we're getting there. So, the next thing, roots like this one, they have very little taper to them. So we want to prune them back shorter and get some subdividing of the roots. So I'm going to prune her off to here. That one should be shortened a bit too. Out to there. This one could be shortened a bit. And this one is okay. This one is going in a curve, so we'll prune her back there. Now here we've got an overlapping root, which is okay. There's a few roots that overlap, but they're going in a nice direction. There's nothing wrong with overlapping roots. It looks very natural, you know, as long as you don't have big thick ones overlapping. Okay, so that's it. We'll just give it another mist here. I had to charge the battery on the camera. So while the battery was charging, I put the tree in some water. And you can do that if you're in the middle of repotting. You get called to dinner or something. Just put your tree in a bowl of water and the roots will be fine till you get back. So it's time to plant the tree. So this is picked as the front of the tree. It shows the trunk line. The apex kind of comes towards you. It's not bad. I'm just looking to see if there's anything better. That's not a bad front. It kind of goes, the apex goes away from you. This front, the back branch kind of gets in the way. Yeah, I think the same position is the best position. So now we're going to place the tree in the pot. And where? So let's look. I'll probably get my head in the way here, but if we put it right on center, looks like kind of okay, but it's a boring composition. If we place it off center, it's better. It's more dynamic. It kind of comes up. This side of the tree kind of creates a bit of balance. You've got a bit of a landscape area there, so I kind of like that. There we go. Okay, so soil. So we're going to put it around the base of the tree first. And you can see with the flat root base, it kind of sits in there nicely. And when we put the soil in, to give it that landscape feel, we want to keep our soil level flat with the edge of the pot. We don't want to mound it up in a hill. Use a spoon and kind of just place the soil wherever you want. Makes it a little easier to get in. We'll just level it out here. Make sure we've got all the air pockets out of the soil. Okay, next step is to water the tree thoroughly, so we'll do that. Again, these shallow pots, they're great if your tree's in a greenhouse, which mine will be. If this pot were left out on the bench in the summer, there's so much surface area that it would dry out very quickly. And you can see when I water it, even though this is really good, brand new soil, it's free draining, the water still pools up on the top. It just doesn't have that hydraulic action that makes the water drain quickly. So these shallow pots, they're good for shows and that. They look really good, but they're not that practical for actually growing your trees in. In the greenhouse it's better. You don't get that surface evaporation, so the soil stays moist and then the tree uses the water in the soil as it needs it. But I wouldn't recommend these pots for growing them outside on your benches. They're just, horticulturally, they're just a problem. So yeah, it's taking a while for the soil to drain. If you tip the pot up, it'll drain a lot quicker. But I'm just making sure it all gets soaked. Tamp it down a bit, make sure it's all contacting the root ball. The next step is we're going to plant some moss on top of the soil. Even though we're trying to capture the essence of an African savanna, we don't want to show this coarse soil on the top. So we're going to put some moss on it. Ideally the moss wouldn't be a lush green moss, but that's about the only color moss comes in around here. Okay, so here we are, we're collecting moss. We're in the shade of an apartment building, and there's a nice patch of moss down here. When you're collecting moss, try and get the thin stuff. If it gets too thick, like over here, it just sticks up too high in your soil. So you want your thinner pieces. I just scrape it off with this tool, like that, and put it in a plastic bag and collect it. So we need a fair amount for this planting of this Serissa. So we're just gonna take some of the fine stuff here, scrape it off and collect it. Okay, so we're back. What you want to do with the moss is dip it in water, or soak it in water. This stuff's quite dry, so you want to leave it in there for a bit. Now you just put your pieces of moss in the water, like so. And when that's soaked up the water, which our first piece has, you want to scrape off as much of the soil as you can, just to keep the moss layer thin. There's not a whole lot on here, but I'm getting some off. And you'll notice you'll get down to the moss's roots when it starts turning a bit of a reddish color. We're getting down there. And any weeds you see in the moss, like little grass or weed sprouting, just pick them out before you plant it. It'll save you a little weeding later on. And then your moss is wet, so then you can place it at the tree. And we're going to plant it right to the base of the tree, because here's the weed I'm taking out. We don't want any, these trees don't create much of a shadow, so we want the moss covering the entire surface. When you're putting your soil line in the pot, if you are going to have moss, you can put the soil line a little shallower, so when you do put your moss layer on, it comes to the right level in the pot. So you want, with the moss on, you want it just at level with the lip of the pot, or just slightly below. You don't want your pot and then the moss mounding up on it. It just looks like the tree needs repotting because it's kind of bulging out of this pot. So it's something to keep in mind is, if my moss is too thick, I may have to remove a bit of this top layer of soil to keep my overall soil level with the lip of the pot. Okay, we finished our work on this tree for today. It looks pretty good. The pot looks a little large at the moment for the tree, but as we grow the canopy out, it'll get wider. I think the tree will kind of grow into the pot. Hopefully by the end of summer it'll start looking better. At the moment the tree looks a little insignificant compared to the pot, but I think as the foliage mass fills out, it'll start to look a little more balanced. I do have some cuttings off this Serissa that I could plant behind the main tree to create kind of a small forest. So that's another option until the main tree grows
big enough to be displayed by itself. But that's it. Thanks everyone for viewing the videos. It's encouraging to see the videos get lots of hits on them. And if you have comments or opinions, put them in the comments section. If you like what I'm doing, hate what I'm doing, whatever, it's good to hear comments. And so, Nigel Saunders for KW Bonsai. We'll see you next time. Bye.